Welcome back to the Ultimate Mixdown. Today we're diving into one of the most exciting topics when it comes to mixing vocals, and that's vocal effects. Specifically in today's video, we'll be talking about using delay to add depth to our vocals. What is vocal depth? Vocal depth refers to how three-dimensional or full the vocal sounds in the overall mix. And the goal of vocal depth is to simulate front-to-back positioning in a virtual space. So how close the singer seems to you or how far away they seem from your ears and your perception. This is much how like we achieved the appearance of side-to-side positioning with vocal widening. And if you haven't seen that video, be sure to check that one out as well. Why use delay? Delay is a tried and true and highly versatile tool that adds that illusion of three-dimensional depth to an otherwise flat-sounding audio source, but it also can be used subtly so that you can still keep the vocal up front. Now before we start, I wanted to give you something. I have a 7 steps to a pro-level mix PDF guide that you can get absolutely free. You can check it out in the description below. Now let's get right into this. At its very core, delay is a time-based echo, and it can be as simple as one echo, or it can be adjusted to provide multiple repeating echoes in time. Now the emphasis here is on the keyword time. Now by doing this, whatever word or phrase is sung and gets picked up by the delay will repeat for a set amount of time until that delay diminishes. Now before we add the delay on, let's take a listen to the vocal in the mix.
Will you go ahead? I think I'll stay.
And just soloing the lead.
Will you go ahead? I think I'll stay.
So here we're going to use this delay effect, so you could either set this in time or sync. The sync lets you set it to 8th notes, 16th notes, quarter notes, or otherwise you just go to time and you type in your preferred time, and this would be in milliseconds. Now, unless you're being super creative, you'll generally want to calculate the time. Basically, if you're doing it in milliseconds, you're taking 60,000 milliseconds, and you divide by the BPM of the song. That gives us a quarter note delay. 60,000 divided by 138, and that gives us about 435 milliseconds for a quarter note delay. To show you what a quarter note delay sounds like, even before we add the delay plugin itself, I'm going to take this track here, our lead vocal, and duplicate it and shift it one beat.
Will you go ahead? I think I'll stay.
Turn off the double will enable the plugin. Now let's take a listen with the delay plugin.
Will you go ahead? I think I'll stay.
So if we wanted this delay to be twice as long, right? So instead of a quarter note, we want it to be a half note. It's very simple. You double this value. So 435, 436 was roughly what we started with. So we'll go to 870, and that should give us a half note delay. Let's take a listen.
Will you go ahead? I think I'll stay.
Okay, and the opposite is true. So you take 435 and you divide it by 2. Okay, so we're around 217, and that will give us an 8th note delay.
Will you go ahead? I think I'll stay.
And if we want to go 16th notes, we divide it once again by 2. That brings us down to 108. And now we have a 16th note delay.
Will you go ahead? I think I'll stay.
You can hear it basically coming in right after the initial audio source is played. It's used a lot in pop, rock, other areas where you want the vocal to be either be more upfront or more aggressive. Keep in mind, these millisecond settings, again, are based off of the BPM of my song. So if your song is 120 BPM, you're going to want to do the calculation that I put up on the screen earlier to figure it out for your own song. Now, some of them have this tone or filter, and this allows you to emphasize more of the low end or more of the high end from the original source in the delay sound. So let's take a listen to that real quick.
Will you go ahead? I think.
So it's low and this is high.
Will you go ahead? I think I'll stay.
So the high one almost sounds telephonic, while the low one sounds more like it's suppressed underwater or something like that. Feedback is the amount of repetitions that the delay gives. So if I increase this.
Will you go ahead? I think I'll stay.
So a little bit goes a long way, and you can actually find that the vocal ultimately gets lost in that, especially if you keep that going when the next phrase begins. Now, some delays have a pan knob to mix left and right, and then this bounce will actually allow you to ping pong. Basically, if it's left, it'll ping pong left and back, and if it's right, it'll ping pong right and back. So we're not going to do anything with the pan or the bounce in this video, but just keep in mind that you can create effects like that. Now, ducking is very important because ducking allows the original audio source to stand out more when a new phrase or a new word is being sung. So if you have something like this crazy feedback, let's say we're doing that as an effect, it significantly diminishes the volume of the delay because that new sound, that new word is being sung.
Well, you go ahead, I think I'll stay.
So we're going to bring the feedback way back because we want a subtle delay. We want three-dimensional space, but we still want our vocal up front. I'm going to keep the ducking maybe 50-60% just so that it keeps taming that delay whenever a new word is sung. And then the mix, this is a dance between how much of the delay you hear versus how much of the original audio source. So we could put this delay on a separate bus like we did with the reverb. I tend to like to put the delay directly on the vocal track if I'm making subtle changes, if I'm using it for a subtle effect. In some other delay plugins, you're looking at a wet and dry slider or knob or something like that. So the amount of wet is essentially how much of the delay is taking over that track, and the amount of dry is how much of the original audio signal is coming through. So if you put dry down to 0 and wet up to 100%, you're just going to hear the delay. Okay, and a lot of these adjustments you do want to do in the context of the mix. So I'm going to bring the mix down first of all, unless I'm really trying to go for some kind of wild effect. Where I think I want to land on is actually an 8th note delay. Okay, and we set our tone down so that it emphasizes more of the lower frequencies. So that's really helpful because then the original audio source, the original vocal, can take up more of the space in the mid to highs, which is where a lot of the frequencies that shine for the vocal exist. And then feedback, we'll probably keep it about there. I like the amount of feedback that we have. Again, you don't want to go too crazy with this, otherwise it's going to start bleeding into your phrasing. And then lastly, we'll keep the ducking up just so that we still dial the delay back so that we can hear it just as a subtle effect. We'll take a listen to it now in the context of the mix.
Well, you go ahead, I think I'll stay.
Possibilities with delay are endless. You can put it on the track, you can put it on a separate bus, you can go crazy with the feedback, the toning or the filtering, the mix or the wet and dry. And I'd also like to remind you to get a copy of that 7 Steps to a Pro Level Mix in the description below. That'll set you up to start mixing today. Thanks again for joining the Ultimate Mixdown. I'll see you in the next video.